Hey guys, Pete here. This is going to be my Mr. Robot Season 3, Episode 3 recap and review. I have to say that I really enjoyed this episode, and something weird happened. Because I don't live in the United States anymore, I have to wait longer to actually watch the episodes. I have to wait till the end in the US. And I get all these notifications. I have notifications for Mr. Robot, obviously, since I am always looking into what's going on with the series. And I happened to read a couple of the beginnings of a couple of reviews before I started watching, and they were terrible. They were saying it was a horrible episode that didn't need to exist, and they couldn't understand why it was necessary. And I try to avoid doing that because it can affect the way that my experience is, and that's really all I have to offer is my experience of watching the episode. I'm not anything more than a fan. I just make my videos based on what I observe as someone who nerds out on these series, and I enjoyed this episode on a lot of levels. If you're into the series like I am, you've been wondering what happened in those 3 days. Tyrell is a bit of a polarizing character. Some people love him and some people hate him. But I think overall, this episode fixed his character for me. Like, the problems I had with it have been resolved. Now, you may have no investment in that storyline. You might only care about Elliot, and that would be understandable. But to not really think this episode was important, you'd have to overlook the idea that Elliot has been obsessed through the entirety of Season 2 with trying to figure out what happened in those days he can't remember. So I feel like it was a big payoff, and there were several other ones in the episode as well. So let's look at what actually happened. The episode was called EPS 3.2 Legacy.so. We expected it to be a flashback, and it was exactly that. It mostly covered what happened at the arcade, how Irving got injected into the story, and where Tyrell went and managed to be able to not be arrested as the most wanted man in America for that period of time. In relation to that, we learned that Irving did show up, and he explains pretty clearly why he's there, because Elliot had messed up. The Dark Army was monitoring what was happening with the 5-9 hack, and they realized they had to intervene swiftly because of Tyrell's involvement. We found out how Elliot ended up in the car, although there's still more missing time that we don't know about. That's something we need to keep in mind for later. But he was sent there by Irving, and then Irving took Tyrell to a safe house that was heavily secured, and then just brought him the support he needed so that he could remain there and not be arrested. So Irving mentions to him that he could put him in contact with Joanna through secure means if that's what he wants to do. And Tyrell, in a very Tyrell fashion, decides that that would not be the smartest move. Now, he just had a child. His wife has basically said that she doesn't want him around if he can't fix their situation. So this is a difficult thing for a man to go through. We see that he gets to watch his child through a baby cam, and that he reads about all the stuff that we saw happen in Season 2 as far as her filing for divorce and all of the tabloid press and everything else that went along that. If we backtrack to the arcade, I think what I found interesting about that sequence, other than just what happened, was that I've always enjoyed the parallels that Sam Esmail makes with the other characters in relation to Elliot. They're all a bit damaged, but in very different ways. I thought this was great in the beginning of Season 2 when we focused in on the character Ray and his loneliness and Dom and her loneliness. Obviously, 3 different people, 3 different stations in life, but all basically struggling with that same deal. Here we find out why Tyrell actually makes sense for this story. We saw him lose just about everything in relation to the mistake he made with Sharon Knowles. We saw Joanna lay out for him flatly that she didn't want him around anymore and that she wouldn't let him see his son if he didn't fix the situation. When he gets fired after she tells him that pretty much screws any chance he has to do things normally. So even though we've seen that he's obsessed with power and that he's very capable at doing the whole executive corporate ladder, we actually learn what Mr. Robot sees in his desperation, how he can be useful. Irving is great. I love the character. I love the way he's portrayed, and it makes total sense how he ended up there and how Tyrell ended up where he was. In the process of showing us how he gets through that period of time, which includes a lot of chopping wood and a misguided thought of trying to leave the compound for a period of time, which ends up in a whole nother rabbit hole. The important thing we learn here is that Tyrell is absolutely bound to this idea of what Elliot can do, and he's bound in a way that someone who doesn't have anything else, like this is his last-ditch effort, and he's going to go down with the ship if necessary. The interview scene I thought was fun. It was maybe a little bit over the top that the guy seemed to be snorting coke while he was doing, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was very interesting the way that it was shot and the way that he broke down. As viewers, we knew that he hated his father. We knew that he killed Sharon Knowles and so on, but the process of breaking him down was enjoyable to watch. We learned about Whiterose a lot more, and the social commentary involved with this, I think, was just spot on. We see that the Alex Jones type is being funded to pass misinformation. That's basically the media world we live in right now. We see that Whiterose is ready to back Trump, and that is pretty spot on for where everything went, I would say. And we learn that she has an island or has a house on an island that is completely off the radar. It doesn't even show up on Google Maps, which is pretty cool when you think about it. So what else did we learn? We learned what we thought already, which was that Santiago is indeed in bed with the Dark Army. He kills the cop and rescues Tyrell. We find out that Irving definitely is a car salesman through and through. He games Tyrell about family, and we get that little shot of the number one dad coffee cup and all that afterwards, which I honestly laughed pretty loudly whenever that happened. I think my neighbors probably heard me laughing at that one. And then one of the big things that really stands out to me is that we learn at the end through Tyrell and Angela's talk that Angela may have known about this disorder that Elliot has for a very long time. We saw this in previous episodes this season where she talks directly to Mr. Robot. That's something that may have existed from before Elliot even really knew what was going on. If you remember season 1, he starts out not remembering, and I think this is really interesting. There's always this talk about things that we might have missed in season 1, and I know from my personal point of view, the idea about him not remembering Darlene is something that I never really tied together with Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot always seems like he appeared at first at that time. Of course, after the fact, you start to think, well, maybe he's been around forever, and there's plenty of theories about when he might have emerged and all of that. But I think that that's something that we really have to take into consideration here is that period of not remembering Darlene also has a lot to do with Mr. Robot, and there could be a whole relationship that exists that we don't really know about yet. We knew Leon was working with the Dark Army. We found out how that actually worked. We saw Elliot go to jail. We saw how that fit into the timeline of what was going on with Tyrell. The detail and the callbacks are just great, I think. There was all these little things that didn't quite make sense and that we've speculated on endlessly. And in this one episode, a lot of those things tie back together and they make sense. Of course, I'll do my things you might have missed video later, so I won't dwell on that too much, but I think this is just a really satisfying episode for fans. Critics might not like it. Fans that are hell-bent on getting answers to what's going to happen in the big picture might not like it, but I think for those of us, and I think because you're watching this video, there's a good chance you're in that club. There are just so many little aha moments throughout. I really enjoyed that. I can't really spin it in a negative way. I at the end, I was happy. I was excited about the series. And, whatever, maybe that's not a popular opinion, but that's the way I felt whenever I got done with it. The music was great. Some of the stuff, it was Gordon Lightfoot that was going on for part of it there, and then it sort of cuts into Cypress Hill. The background music was good as well. The music that was going on and how it stops whenever the interviewer closes the book. I don't know. I'm interested to see what you guys think. The gun stuff all makes sense. I think that was all pretty self-explanatory. I don't think we really need to dwell on that. I think we all got the idea what happened there. It'll be interesting to see if Joanna Wellick plays a part beyond her death in the second episode. It'll be interesting to see if she's in some flashbacks going forward. I'm much more interested in Angela's relationship with Elliot in the past than I have been, and I'm curious to see where some of the comments that she's made to him about being younger together will play out later on. The last bit there, we saw Elliot all drugged up after surgery, and we see Mr. Robot flicker. It briefly makes me think back to times when maybe Elliot was actually operating as Mr. Robot, but as far as taking Tyrell to the arcade, that doesn't seem to be the case at all. Mr. Robot seems to be surprised that he's there, and he wants to kill him. Of course, call it divine intervention if you're looking through the lens that Tyrell was at that time. That didn't happen, and, Irving tells us later what the problem was and takes care of it. So yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait to do the trailer breakdown tomorrow and then dig back and look at all these different little callbacks and think more about what a novel called Beach Towel is actually about, the book that Irving's writing. That was a nice touch, I think. And what the hell else is Whiterose up to? I mean, the Frank Cody thing is pretty big, I think. Like, we saw Gideon die as a result of that information, which is obviously something that has been horrible for Elliot, our main character, to process. I mean, that was his fault. But Whiterose and his disinformation campaign seems to have played a big part in that as well. So that's about it for this. Please let me know what you thought. Please let me know if you hated it. Why did you hate it? If you loved it, why did you love it? What was the biggest moment for you? The biggest reveal out of so many? Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. You'll want to turn on notifications after you do that so you know when my new videos come out. Follow me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active, but I keep Instagram and Facebook page as well, so follow those if you prefer those. And thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you soon.